Today I would like to tell you a few things about a part of my dissertation project, which focuses, or this part I'm going to tell you about, it's going to focus on how our brains like different rewards. So in psychology, a reward is pretty much anything that a person can find motivating or simply rewarding. So as Calvin is showing us here, certain motivations can, or certain incentives can motivate an organism to engage in behaviors. So normally, after we want certain rewards, we also tend to enjoy them. And as tokens, like candies or money, can work as rewards, also social cues like smiles or gestures or modulation of your voice or verbal praise and so on, can work as social rewards. However, there seems to be something internally different about being rewarded with cash or being rewarded with your bosses saying, "Good job, Lena." So what is that really? What motivates us more to act? Is it the money? Is it the social feedback? Is it somehow the combination of both of them that make us feeling truly rewarded? Now, before you judge that question trivial, think of that. There's so many different dimensions in which rewards can differ from each other. For example, rewards can be tangible or material, like money, or they can be transient, like smiles. They can be primary, like food and sex, or they can be secondary, like money. They can be immediate, they can be postponed, and so on and so on. There's so many different dimensions. If they can differ on so many different levels, can we even assume that the brain has one mechanism, one area, or one common base that could process all of these rewards as one? Well, according to some theories, one of them is the wanting-liking theory of rewards, which is kind of a framework in neuropsychology for this anticipation of a reward and then reception of a reward, says that it's possible. There's also the social exchange theory that says that we don't really differ much in the way we behave in social and in economic situations, because what we do is basically trying to maximize our rewards in order to somehow navigate our social environment. If that's so, that indeed we may have exactly the same mechanism and the same brain area that would process all the rewards. However, then we have the clinical studies. And the clinical studies are showing us that there are certain populations, certain groups, that may have problems in processing one type of these rewards, for example, social, but not the other, for example, non-social. An example of that is autism. So autistic people are suspected to be insensitive to social rewards, to smiles, for example, but have preserved processing of non-social rewards like tokens and money. So let's look at that a bit closer. Normally, when we think of clinical studies, what we see is this clinical group, so the group diagnosed with a certain condition, and a control group that is supposed not to have these traits, not to have the condition. However, we all know that autism is a spectrum. If it's a spectrum, that means that we can track different intensities of autistic traits across the whole general population. So when you imagine this is where diagnosis is being put, these people would be called autistic, these people would be called neurotypical. However, these and these people, the general population, the neurotypicals, all of us, we also have autistic traits. So when you fulfill a questionnaire, you can find how many autistic traits you have in what different domains. And we can do the same thing with social anxiety, with behavioral inhibition, with behavioral approach, and the last two, in a simplified version or simplified way, are trying to assess whether an individual is more motivated by a drive towards a reward or by trying to avoid a punishment. So it's very, very easy to assess how people already place themselves on this spectrum. We just ask them to fulfill a questionnaire like AQ, LSAS, or the BIS-BAS scales. And that is exactly what we did. We designed a study in which 51 neurotypical participants, so participants with no diagnosis, were performing a task during which we were collecting their brain signal. And for that, we were using the EEG, or electroencephalography. Now, what it basically does is to measure the electrical field of the brain. And there's quite a few standard information on how we collected the data and pre-processed that, but I don't really want you to focus on that. What I want you to remember is that we collected the signal, the brain signal of our participants who are facing certain events. And then we analyzed these event-related potentials, or namely one of them, the P3. The P3 stands for a positive component that is elicited around 300 milliseconds after an onset of an event. For that, we used a task that is called acute incentive, monetary and social task. And here, first participants see a cue in 3 different conditions. That is telling them what kind of a reward they can receive later in the task. We introduced the monetary reward, so people were getting 5 cents for each correct answer, social reward, for which they were getting a smile, and a combined social monetary reward, in which they were getting both the smile and 5 cents. They were waiting for a little bit, and then they were being asked to guess what's going to be the color of the next card being drawn from a deck of blue and purple cards shuffled together. Again, they waited a little bit, and finally they received feedback. Reward for correct answers and no reward for not correct answers. For the monetary conditions, they only saw a tick or a cross, giving them the feedback, and for the 2 others, they were seeing the face of the main experimenter, either smiling or frowning. And I see already that some of you have noticed, the face on the screen is indeed mine, what a reward. And my participants were seeing exactly the same stimuli, but I'm not going to tell you now why I decided to torment myself with seeing my own face on the screen. So if you can't come up with any question in discussion, you can throw that at me, and I'm going to tell you more. So this is what we see. This is how the brain responses look like. What you see on the map is the topography of the activation. The red part is the positive activation, which allows us to actually identify it as a P3. Now, what we do is that we average over these electrodes, and then we plot the brain responses to a certain event, like the social reward. So the blue area here is the P3 component we're looking for. That's the response to the social reward, that's the response to the monetary reward, and that's the response to the combined social and monetary reward. What you can already tell, just by looking at it, is that the responses to the social rewards were slightly bit smaller than the other 2 conditions. But of course, to evaluate that, we have to look at numbers. So what we did is that we constructed a multiple regression model with mixed effects, and this is the analysis of variance table performed on it. And now, as a cognitive scientist, I know the moment I throw it at you, your brains are going to zone out immediately. So I'm going to keep it there for the curious minds, but I'm going to ask you to look at the plot instead. So here, what you can see is that the monetary condition elicited higher amplitudes of the P3, and the combined social monetary condition as well, as compared to the social one, and that the dotted ones here, the rewards elicited higher responses than the no rewards conditions. And this is also visible in this table where the p-values prove to be significant, statistically significant for these 2 things. So what does it all mean? We looked at how social, monetary, and combined rewards can influence the brain responses of our participants. And we saw larger brain responses to the monetary and the combined condition against the social one, which may suggest that the monetary component in both of these ones seems to have some kind of a higher rewarding value to our participants than the only social one. So why is that so? Is it because the monetary component is tangible? It's material, they could take the money and leave the lab? Is it because experimental situations are never the same as the normal social setting out there and we can't really compare what's happening? Or is it maybe they just didn't enjoy my face? That can also be a factor. I'm going to leave that food of thought, and I'm going to go to the second summary of the second storyline of this talk, which were the traits we looked for. So the autistic traits, social anxiety, and behavioral inhibition and approach, we looked at them in our sample, again, neurotypical sample, looking for whether these traits could somehow influence how they were processing different rewards. But we found no such modulations whatsoever, which would suggest that reward processing, or at least reward reception, is preserved across these traits. However, I would like you to remember that we only talked about reward reception. We only talked about the moment somebody receives a reward. If we want to have the bigger, full picture, we have to also look at reward anticipation. So how people are wanting the reward once they get the incentive. So to sum up very quickly, we looked at the brain responses to social and monetary rewards in a neurotypical population of people with different traits possibly influencing the reward processing signal in acute incentive task. And we found that this tangible monetary component can increase subjective rewarding value of the outcomes, and all of that remained completely uninfluenced by the traits we considered. And with that, I would like to thank my supervisors, Isabel Dziubek and Marijke Bayer, and who funds all of my thinking about that, and of course, all of you for your attention. Thank you.